CBS News has learned members of the cabinet have discussed invoking the 25th Amendment after yesterday's Capitol Hill breach. That amendment defines the succession in the executive branch in the event that the President of the United States cannot perform his duties. Let's bring in Margaret Brennan. She is the host of Face the Nation on Sundays here on CBS News. She's going to talk to us about this. Margaret, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Explain to our audience, first off, how the 25th Amendment works. When is it meant to be invoked? And what would have to happen for it to be invoked?
Well, thanks, Vlad. A lot of our viewers have probably heard speculation about the 25th Amendment a number of times over the past 4 years. And never until the past 24 hours have I been told that the highest levels of the Trump administration are indeed discussing it. Now, what this provision does is it would allow for the vice president to effectively step into the job for the remaining days of the Trump administration term to become commander-in-chief and remove President Trump from power. Now, this is often and has been used for temporary periods of time. For example, if the president were undergoing anesthesia for an operation and those legal powers needed to be transferred just for procedural reasons. These are different circumstances we're talking about now. We are talking now about the fact that the faith and confidence of some of the very top advisors to the president has frankly been shaken to its core in the past 24 to 36 hours by the series of events, as well as the president's state of mind. Now, I want to emphasize that this is a very dynamic situation. Yesterday, frankly, scared people. Seeing individuals storm the Capitol to go through with that level of security breach and to do so after the president specifically told his followers to march on the Capitol to challenge weak Republicans was just a bridge too far for many top Republican leaders in Congress and some within the administration. Now, on the technicalities of how this would work, this would have to be a majority of the cabinet coming to the conclusion that they all believe and have kind of a consensus, a quorum, that the president should be asked to step aside. He can protest that. This is something that would also require the vice president to be on board with. And we know that the vice president, at least as of last night, had not been presented with these plans. It's not at all at this stage. It's in early stages. And that the vice president spent most of yesterday in lockdown just because of the security threat, since he was at the Capitol when it was stormed by those pro-Trump supporters. So now that we, in the light of day, have a number of cabinet members returning to this country and returning to the Capitol. Remember, the Treasury Secretary was in Israel. The Homeland Security Secretary was in Bahrain. The National Security Advisor was in Miami. You had a number of top officials who were just not in direct contact with the vice president and top leadership yesterday. So we want to continue to report this, but we know that senior administration officials have been discussing it, and now a number of networks and organizations are reporting that as well.
You know, in the middle of all of that violence yesterday, there was a statement issued that the vice president had activated the National Guard, had been calling in the National Guard. And the statement was written in a very specific way that excluded the president. And so there was a little bit of talk about, you know, why wasn't the president involved in this sort of a decision? What do you make of that statement and the fact that it seemed as if the vice president had sort of taken control in that moment? Taking control is I don't mean taking control. You know what I mean, Margaret. Right. Considering what we're talking about right now, I should be specific with the language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean, and that language in that statement from the White House and from the Vice President's office and from the National Security Advisor mentioning the Vice President was carefully parsed by political reporters here in Washington. We know that it was the Vice President who spoke with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is the top military advisor to the Commander-in-Chief, typically, and discussed activating the National Guard in the numbers that they did yesterday. Remember, National Guard members had been unarmed and on standby in the district leading up to yesterday. When the storming happened, you saw National Guard members activated from a number of states, and including as far away as New Jersey, to come down to help in the Capitol, because frankly, Capitol Police just lost control of the situation. So the vice president stepped into that role and took that measure. And it has been reported that the president just simply wasn't willing to do so. It was also not lost on people, the language in a public statement by the National Security Advisor, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, when he noted that he is, as he said, very proud of the vice president and noted the danger that he was in the Capitol, signaling to many that that is who he stands with Mike Pence. Remember, it was the vice president who was just doing his ceremonial duty in overseeing the certification of the electoral college, just recognizing Joe Biden, the president-elect's victory yesterday. That was the triggering of President Trump's anger. He tweeted specifically that Mike Pence had made the wrong decision. The president told his supporters at that rally to march to the Capitol. So the president was directly, verbally going after his vice president. So to have the top national security advisor issue this public statement of support for the vice president is obviously something that may not have been welcomed by President Trump himself in what is clearly a moment of anger for him. So there's a lot, I know, that people are jumping to conclusions over what could happen, where this may go. This is dynamic, and we are following it moment by moment, and we will see just what the level of stability in the Capitol is in these coming days.
So, Margaret, just for my own education, to even begin these discussions around the 25th Amendment, I know that Ben Tracy on our air this morning said that the relationship between the president and the vice president has deteriorated, and we've seen evidence of that just on social media and some of the reactions that we've been getting from people in Washington, D.C. But would initiating even a discussion around the 25th Amendment, would that have to come from the vice president? Because somehow I just can't see Ben Carson or Betsy DeVos or Elaine Chao beginning these discussions around the 25th Amendment. I mean, it's possible, I guess, but wouldn't it have to have somebody with the authority of his office behind him or her to lead those discussions, at least even initially?
The cabinet members would have to bring it to the vice president.
Got it.
And at my latest reporting, is that has not happened. So these were, as I was emphasizing, early talks with cabinet members contemplating it and discussing it. And that is the news, right? I mean, just the fact that those conversations are taking place underscores the level of concern at the highest levels of the Trump administration. And I'm putting those careful parameters around it because, I mean, frankly, it has been a Democratic pipe dream for 4 years that the 25th Amendment would be invoked. I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about political watchers. I'm talking about administration officials, people who have supported this president and their party and are deeply troubled by what they have seen. But I am not saying it is likely. In the same way that, frankly, we are seeing all these reports of potential resignations of officials. We only have about 2 weeks left in the Trump administration. And so, you know, you can ask about the practicality of resigning at this point as well. You know, it complicates the numbers even within the cabinet. I was looking into yesterday, and it appears that an acting cabinet member, remember there are a number of cabinet members who are in an acting role because they haven't been Senate confirmed. It appears, according to legal scholars so far I've spoken to, that they could get on board with invoking it. But, you know, those are questions on the practicalities better put to a lawyer, which I'm not. But I am telling you that the conversations are happening within the administration. They may not go anywhere.
Margaret Brennan, a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much.